You know, I actually lived in Russia for a bit, and one of the first things that hits you is just how much the language is tied to ideas of respect and hierarchy. So when I started seeing all these headlines about African recruits in the Russian army, I had a feeling there was a deeper story there. A story that you can actually find hidden in the very words they use.
Okay, so let's get right to the big question you hear all the time, right? The whole whataboutism argument. Hey, the US, France, they've been recruiting foreigners for decades. So why is everyone freaking out now that Russia's doing it? And on the surface, it sounds like a fair point, but when you actually look at what's happening on the ground, it is not the same thing at all.
So the claim is that, hey, a foreign soldier is a foreign soldier, doesn't matter what flag is on their uniform, but the evidence we're going to walk through tells a completely different story. This isn't just about recruiting foreigners. What we're looking at here is a system built from the ground up on deception, on profound disrespect, and ultimately on the idea that these men are completely disposable.
To really get this, we have to start at the very beginning of the journey for these guys, because you have to understand, for the vast majority of them, this journey doesn't start with a burning desire to go fight a war. It starts with something much more basic, the search for a better job, for a better life.
It all kicks off with a lie. Recruiters, like this one operative, known as the Friend of Russia, are all over platforms like Telegram and TikTok, and they're targeting vulnerable young men. But listen to what they're advertising. It's not soldier jobs. They're offering positions as drivers, security guards, electricians, promising up to $3,000 a month and a fast track to a Russian passport. I mean, for a lot of people, that's an absolutely life-changing offer.
But here's the bait and switch. The moment they land in Russia, that security job they were promised, poof, it vanishes. Instead, they're handed a military contract, and, get this, it's written entirely in Cyrillic, an alphabet and a language they can't possibly read. And then they're given an ultimatum. Either you sign this document, or we cancel your visa and deport you right now. It's not a choice. It's a trap, plain and simple.
And this is where that whole language thing I mentioned earlier becomes so important. Because the second these men are in the system, the words that are used to talk to them and about them reveal everything you need to know about how they're valued. The disrespect is baked in from day one.
Okay, so in Russian, there's a huge cultural difference between two little words for you. There's the formal V, which you use for strangers, for your boss, for anyone you want to show respect to. And then there's the informal D. You use D for your close friends, your family, and for children. In videos of these recruits, you hear Russian officers only using D when they speak to these grown African men. It's a power move. It's a deliberate way of infantilizing them, treating them like little kids, not like fellow soldiers.
And believe it or not, it gets so much worse. Among themselves, Russian commanders use some truly dehumanizing slang. They call them razovye, which literally translates to disposables or single-use items. Another common term is ugol, which just means coal. This isn't just some dark barracks humor. This is language that strips them of their humanity, turning them into objects to be used up and then thrown away.
And this language of contempt, this idea of them being disposable, well, it's not just talk. It translates directly into a brutal, cynical, and deadly military strategy on the battlefield. They're treated exactly like their nickname suggests.
Just look at the difference in investment. In a Western army, a foreign recruit will get 4, 5, 6 months of intensive training. They get proper gear, legal rights. In Russia, these African recruits report getting as little as 10 days to maybe 3 weeks of training before they are thrown onto the front lines for what are chillingly called meat assaults.
And that brings us to the one tactical term that really defines their existence, Mayachko. It translates to beacon or little lighthouse. Now, what's the purpose of a beacon? It's to be seen. And in a war zone, being seen means being shot at. A Mayachko is a soldier sent out on purpose to draw enemy fire.
So here's how this horrific tactic works. Step 1. An African unit is pushed forward, often with shoddy equipment and almost no support. Step 2. Inevitably, they get spotted and draw fire from hidden Ukrainian positions. And then, Step 3. The real Russian units, who've been held safely back, use those muzzle flashes to pinpoint the enemy's location, and then they attack. These African soldiers aren't the assault force, they're just the bait. Now, I know this sounds almost unbelievably cruel, but this isn't just based on a few horror stories from survivors. When you dig into the data, the cold, hard numbers tell the exact same story of total expendability. As of early 2024, researchers have managed to identify more than 1,780 African recruits from 36 different countries who are fighting for Russia.
So this is not some small isolated thing. It's a massive, continent-spanning recruitment machine.
Let's just zoom in on one country, Ghana. Out of 272 recruits that have been identified, 55 are already confirmed dead. That is a mortality rate of over 20%, 1 in 5. And we're seeing similarly devastating numbers for recruits from Kenya, from Cameroon. They are dying at a horrifically higher rate than ethnic Russian soldiers, who are often kept back in more technical and, frankly, safer roles.
So when you put it all together, you've got the deceptive recruiting, the dehumanizing language, the suicidal tactics, and the absolutely staggering casualty rates. It all points to a really clear and disturbing conclusion.
This, right here, is the fundamental difference. Western systems, and look, they have their flaws, for sure, but they offer a path forward. In France, there's this powerful concept where a wounded soldier can become French by blood spilled. In the US, service provides a clear, if sometimes difficult path to citizenship. But in Russia, the end of service for these men is to fulfill their nickname, to be a disposable, a human beacon abandoned in a trench, all to save the life of a real Russian soldier.
Russia loves to position itself as this great anti-colonial partner for Africa, right? A friend standing against Western exploitation. But this whole situation feels eerily familiar, doesn't it? It's the same old story of extraction, but this time, the commodity is infinitely more precious. They're not just taking resources from the ground anymore. They're extracting human lives.
So let's go all the way back to that first question we asked. Is the West anger just hypocrisy? Well, after looking at all this, I think the answer is a pretty clear no. This is a fundamentally different system, operating by a different set of rules. So the question isn't really about hypocrisy anymore. The real question is, what do we call this? What's the word for a system that lures desperate men with false promises only to use them as human bait?